Kia ora and welcome everybody who's listening. My name's Karina and I am living on Waiheke Island in the Gulf of Hauraki in Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland, New Zealand. And Waiheke Island is the home of Ngāti Pāoa iwi. And I'd like to welcome everybody who's come to listen to this kōrero, this interview today. I'm interviewing my mother, Dale Hunter, who is a facilitator, has worked for many years with Zenergy Global Facilitation Company and has written several books, including the well-known Art of Facilitation, which is a groundbreaking work in the field of facilitation. Welcome, Dale.
Thank you. Lovely to be with you, Karina. And I am in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland at the moment, and this is the ancestral home of the Ngāti Whātua people.
Kia ora. So today's topic for this conversation is co-facilitation. Tell me, Dale, what does co-facilitation mean to you? What does it bring up, and when might we want to work with another facilitator?
Well, co-facilitation means that it does mean working with another facilitator. And it's quite a big area to talk about, an interesting area. And actually, just thinking of Australia, there are some very experienced co-facilitators in Australia, one of whom is a great friend of mine, Marie Martin, who's written quite a bit about co-facilitation. So I'd just like to acknowledge her, and having learned a lot from her. So in terms of the, there's quite a few elements to co-facilitation, because one might immediately think of a big group, perhaps 20 or more, up to hundreds of people, where you have someone involved in the actual facilitation role, taking turns perhaps, which is certainly co-facilitation. But it comes in many shapes and sizes, right from a small group, maybe a work group, where the manager often facilitates the team. However, there's also a different way of doing it, in which other people in the group share that role, and they facilitate through the actual facilitation, and the manager provides more the content. And sometimes that's referred as to co-facilitation too. Or there could be a number of people in the team who take turns facilitating without the manager being present. And that's also co-facilitation. It comes in lots of shapes and sizes. It's also sometimes the role is applied to where you might have someone who is doing a different kind of role. So for online facilitation, you might have someone who is actually managing the technical side of that, managing the room and the breakout rooms and all the technical side. And that is a kind of co-facilitation as well. So, it's a general term, but there's lots of aspects to it. Yeah.
With the first example that you gave of the manager facilitating the team meeting, there are aspects of power that comes into play with that, aren't there?
There are, that's right. And yes, there's definitely power. And of course, there's many different kinds of power. And people have written a lot about that too, that topic of different kinds of power. So a manager has what we call positional power. They have it all the time, and they can, the people know that person has particular decision-making power or access to people higher up the organisation, or all kinds of ways that they can influence the decision making. But there are other kinds of power too, and the facilitator is what we call an assigned power. They have an assigned power role. It's given to them while they are carrying out that role. And definitely facilitation has has power attached to it. It actually has quite a lot of power to influence what people say, even how people feel, and really all aspects of what's going on during the actual meeting. Or it could be before and after too, but generally speaking, it's assigned for that particular meeting or set of meetings. Yeah.
Yes, and when working with another person, particularly if you are co-facilitating in a large group meeting and there's two of you there, I suppose balancing the power between the two people is quite an art.
Oh, well, it is, but it definitely is. And there's usually quite a lot of work that goes on before the meeting between the facilitators to work out who'll be playing what role when. I mean, there's a lot of technical things that are happening when you're facilitating, managing the resources and movement and breakout rooms, and and so a co-facilitator might mainly do those things, and there might be like there might be a facilitator in the main room, but when there's breakout rooms, there might be in fact a number of co-facilitators in that kind of scenario who come into play, or it might be a equal role between two facilitators who take turns facilitating the whole meeting, and have equal time actually doing the facilitation. So it's a spectrum. Yeah, it could be anywhere on the spectrum. It's also a great means for experienced facilitators to train up other facilitators too, from being an assistant up towards facilitating and co-facilitating. Yeah.
What would you say was the difference between the assistant's role and the co-facilitation role, or even just assistant and facilitator? What's the real difference?
Well, the co-facilitator or assistant facilitator might just be getting the resources together and handing them to the facilitator. So it might be purely technical role, or it could be anything from upwards from that, doing part of the small facilitation roles, or it could basically be anything. So there's no set distinctions. It's what works between the people involved. I mean, for example, it might be important if you are working with different ethnicities, or to have at least one person who is of the main ethnicity, or if it's many ethnicities, that would probably be important. Obviously, you can't cover everything. It might be important to have a man and a woman in certain contexts. So there's all sorts of decisions in the background, so that the people in the room can feel comfortable and be able to be heard, and to feel comfortable about speaking up and speaking their truth. Yeah, those are all factors that come into play.
Is there anything about the relationship between the two facilitators that it's worth mentioning, how that relationship might impact on the group or might not impact on the group? For example, the way that they speak to each other, or the way that they are together. What works?
Well, of course, it's great if the two or more facilitators can have a clear relationship with one another, and that they are relating in a unfettered, unencumbered way, that they don't have a build-up of issues and emotions between them. And that's part of preparing for a facilitation. And I mean, this is really in any facilitation anyway. The facilitators need to prepare and work together have a session together where they actually get clear with one another, and a debrief afterwards. So those are important elements of co-facilitation, and also important elements for if there's only one person facilitating, that they have someone who's not involved that they do, for example, debrief with after sessions. Yeah.
Right. And what sort of things would get covered in a debrief?
Well, a debrief would cover both personal issues between the facilitators, but also reflections on how the actual meeting or processes went, and how people responded, and if there are any issues that need to be followed up on. And so it would be generally looking at the whole meeting itself, and also looking at how one might improve one's work in the future too. So always looking ahead, both looking at the meeting, but how might I do things better next time.
Right. So that's the place, I presume, to bring up anything that doesn't work, and rather than to sort of talk about it when the group is happening, to take those things to the debrief.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
There are many different kinds of groups, from very small groups to really large groups. And so is it necessary to have a co-facilitator in a small group?
If it's a small group of, say, up to 12 people, that's as a rough guideline. No, one facilitator can facilitate. I mean, some people are comfortable up to 20 or more people. But it also depends on the length of time. If it's a workshop that's over several days, for example, even if it's a group of, say, between 12 and 20, it could still be useful to have a co-facilitator. But then, of course, budget issues come into play too. So it just may not be practical. The client may not be willing to pay for that.
And with a small group where the facilitator role is passed to different people on different weeks, which sometimes happens, sometimes the quality of facilitation can be, better or worse, which can affect the meetings as well. So how necessary is it for everybody in the group to have facilitation training? Or is it possible just to sort of pick it up as you go along?
It's a set of professional skills. So I'm just trying to think of a parallel. Well, say accountancy skills. So you might work in an organisation and have financial responsibility and have no accountancy or financial management, that's a better term, financial management skills, but it would be certainly preferable if you did, depending on how much responsibility you've got. And facilitation skills are a professional set of skills which make a big influence on a group and an organisation. So yes, it's very, very helpful to have some training in that. And there's lots of great training organisations in most countries that I've been to. So there's plenty of people available to provide the training.
That's interesting, because nowadays a lot of people get called facilitators, sort of any group now, instead of having a leader or a teacher even, you might have a facilitator, but not everybody who takes that role would really understand that facilitation was something that one could get actual skills in. So it's the meaning of the word has changed or has become broader over the last 20-30 years.
That's true. I mean, when I began working as a facilitator, most people didn't know the role. It was a new role. But now it's gone almost to the other extreme, that everyone kind of assumes that they can facilitate. Maybe that's a bit like the word teacher. I mean, people say, well, I can teach you how to do this and I can teach you how to do that, so I'm a teacher. But that's very different from actually being a trained teacher who, can be certified and work with a group or classroom of people and teach them, and knowing the myriad of skills involved with teaching. So yes, I think that's quite makes things quite difficult, that the term has become really, it's become confused.
It's become almost diluted.
It has, yeah. So a professional and certified facilitator is what you need if you want a major meeting or intervention to happen in an organisation. And there are various certification processes that are available now in the world, including the International Association of Facilitators. And there's lots of really good networks as well. And there's different organisations specialising in facilitation skills. So it's good to look out for that. Yeah,
perhaps we could put some links up below this video when we post it to some of those different organisations. Like there's the AFN in Australia, Australasian Facilitators Network, and is it the IOA?
International Association of Facilitators.
IOA as well, yeah, and there will be others as well. Yeah, IAF.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a tricky area which needs to be talked about a lot.
True. Awesome. Well, that's a amazing lot of information that you've shared with us today, Dale. Is there anything else that you'd like to say at all about co-facilitation, or any other thing that you'd like to bring up?
There's a lot more that I could say about this, but there's one thing that it is very important to say, and this applies particularly to internal facilitators, and that is that if, for example, as I do, I live in a cooperative community, and we use facilitators. But one thing that's really important, I find, when I'm facilitating, and I certainly encourage it for all the other facilitators here, is that when an item comes up on an agenda that you are involved with personally and that you want to speak to, that you don't facilitate that particular item, that you pass the facilitation over to your co-facilitator to facilitate that item. And that's one of the very important reasons to have a co-facilitator, if you're both involved in the organisation, that you can keep your that you can speak for yourself, that you need to create a vehicle that you can speak for yourself, but you do that by passing the facilitation for that particular agenda item to someone else who's not involved.
Right, because then you come into the assigned power dynamic, the power over dynamic. You can really influence, as in the facilitator's chair, even to how people vote or on a topic.
Exactly. You can do that inadvertently anyway, even because you might have an opinion. And a facilitator's role is not about giving opinion on content. It's important to stay out of the content. So when you really do need to have a say in the content, then you pass the role to someone else. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really valuable.
Mm.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today. I look forward to talking to you about another topic on facilitation soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karina.